burning questions.
All right, so let's get started today because there's a lot of imagery in this text. So last week was sort of a tease to get us. We had a pause. The author gave us sort of a pause, and we had two witnesses sort of show up. There's some debate as to who they could be. Metaphorically, they're often seen as the church, though they have been seen as other figures in Jewish literature. I should say in the Old Testament, we have people from the Old Testament that would be similar to that. So today, everything gets moving. You finally get rolling into this, and we're going to take a look at some themes and some imagery that they still don't know what to do with. We'll talk about a number that we often hear so often that, spoiler alert, nobody knows what the number means. Even the people that were right after John don't know what John was talking about. So
666.
666. So
Lots of movies have.
lots of movies have. And just to throw even an oil or a wrench in the works, Christ is often referred to as 888. And we'll talk about what 666 could possibly mean, who it could possibly mean.
Where did this 888 come from?
So they do a thing called numerology, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the ways that they have that Christ was sort of thought of was 888 because the other reason, just thinking in terms of generalities, in terms of 666, if you think of the perfect number, what would the perfect number be? 777. So 666 is less than 777. So that was one possible explanation for that. So that the number of the beast is a reminder of the imperfection of the devil, and that the devil will never make it to. Dennis, you can sit next to me. I won't be mean.
Me and Marble match.
But
Yeah.
hey, there you go. They match.
Match colors.
Hair color.
We're interrupting.
Fine.
Okay, smile, Marvel.
My hair is all goofy.
I like that explanation, though.
So then,
Okay, back to the subject.
so if you think of 666 as sort of less than perfect, so every number is less than perfect. So if the perfect number is 777, 666 is a representation of the devil because the devil cannot
Who
be
came
perfect.
up with that? I like that.
It's that's one thing. But then we'll talk about who it could potentially be, who each of these things could be, based on the first century. So
But that's in chapter 13.
yeah, I know I'm getting ahead of myself.
But
So
we're in 12, right?
we're in 12.
I did do it right.
So yeah, we're gonna start.
Go by, but
Yeah, we'll start in 12. Let's see, it goes to, how about we do 1 through 6, then the other person can read the rest, as Paul Harvey say, the rest of the story. So 1 through 6 for the first one.
And a great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth, in anguish for delivery. And another portent appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems upon his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, that he might devour her child when she brought it forth. She brought forth a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which to be nourished for 1,260 days.
And then the rest of the chapter.
And
Actually,
war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accused them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short."
all right, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, so 13 through the end then.
Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, and that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for time and times. She is nourished for a time and times and half a time. It's odd. From the presence of the serpent. So the serpent spewed water out of the mouth like the flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring and keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ.
All right.
And he stood on the sand of the sea.
Yeah,
Who can make that all up?
it's really picturesque.
So my question is
Only one?
he just, yeah, well, but the big one is he just talking about Mary and Jesus? I mean, is he just talking about the woman is Mary and
So what do you
the
guys think?
birth to Jesus? Is he trying to
Well, you said
talk
the male
about
child
that?
was to rule.
So what do you guys
And
think?
then, he's been, Herod was trying to get him and all kinds of people are trying to get him. I don't know. Is that
What do you think?
it's a possibility because anything is possible.
It could be. What would be some other answers though to that? What's another set of imagery for a woman like this?
That it would be Israel,
Another one's
having
Israel.
the 12 tribes.
Yep.
Oh. So he's going. But then what
And
did
Jesus
she,
came out of
the
The 12
Tribes.
the
tribes.
tribes.
Yeah.
And I have too, her labor pains represent the struggles that were part of the life of Israel.
hmm So in some sense, it could
Okay.
be it's, and that's, but you're exactly right. It's that, that's what we as contemporary Christians, that's what our mind is drawn to because of the
that's we know.
yeah, that's the Christmas story. I mean, it seems very familiar to us. And then I'll go back to John was a Jewish Christian. So he is going to rely back on farther in the Old Testament. And at this time, too, he might not have known the Gospel of Luke.
Oh.
He might not have read the Gospel of Mark. Maybe. We don't know. He could have just read the Gospel of John, which has like nothing about Jesus' early life. So that's another thing we don't know. We don't know if he had any of these other gospels to look at or any of Paul's writings to look at, and Paul doesn't talk very much about the beginning times of Jesus either. So, and Paul's he would more likely have read because Paul's writings came out before the gospels did, believe it or not. Most of Paul's writings did. So that's what people were reading, were the gospel, or not. They were reading Romans, they were reading 1st and 2nd Corinthians, they were reading these type of texts, more so than the Gospels. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind as well, too. How it's laid out for us in the Bible isn't necessarily the chronological way that they were written in the New Testament.
Right.
So that's something just to keep in mind as well, too.
And so thinking that it was Jesus is too far ahead of.
Right.
We're getting ahead of the story.
Right. So John knows about Jesus, but does he know the story out of the Gospel of Luke?
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
We're making assumptions as Christians. Oh yeah, he's had to have read the Bible, but the Bible wasn't there yet. So they had all these scrolls and stuff like that. Definitely it could have been present, but we just don't know. So just keep that in mind too. So traditionally, if you look at it from a Jewish perspective, you guys are exactly right. It is oftentimes a woman who's in birth is that the people of Israel, and the birth pangs again is all the stuff they've gone through. So that's something to keep in mind here, or I should say, the idealized version of the people of Israel. The idealized version, because they have fallen short many, many, many times. And with that, how does John think of that in terms of the church? How does John think about the church in not necessarily comparison to the people of Israel? Or how does yes, I know. But how would John see that? How would John see the connection between the people of Israel and the church? What do you guys think?
His future? Oh.
So John didn't see, he saw that sort of the same progression. He saw the church in line, the church of the first century in line with the people of Israel. He sees the church as an extension of the people of Israel, because the Messiah came out, they're following the teachings of the Messiah, and so John is seeing, so the reason why this imagery works so well for John is because he doesn't see that there's any difference between the people of Israel and the church. When he talks about, he sees them as one together in time. Because we also have to remember at this particular time too, depending when this was written, there still was a lot of fight between the Christians and the rabbinic Judaism. So there wasn't a clear-cut way that the Jewish peoples have sort of gone off to in terms of religion. There's people following Christianity, there's people following rabbinic Judaism. There isn't any clear-cut winner, depending when this is written. There's still a lot of fight there. So for John, it makes a lot of sense that since there's not that clear division, that he sees the people of Israel and the church as a natural extension of the people of Israel. Does that make sense? Which is why you have this type of imagery in the text. People are going to attach to that. So,
why does he pick the red dragon as the devil? Or evil, or I don't know what you want to call it.
Right. The red color of the dragon, which may be part of the tradition, symbolizes the murderous character of Satan.
Where do we get our cartoon of the red devil with the horns and the tail?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that Satan in the Bible has sort of had a progression as well too. If you look at, because Satan was just the adversary. Because if you look in Job, Satan went up to heaven and was talking to God in heaven about Job. And you'll see other parts within the Bible where Satan is always the one accusing, very much like when he tests Jesus. You see that is how Satan or the devil is portrayed in the Bible. And they're saying that the fight that happens in heaven is more of a legal fight versus a actual physical confrontation.
Oh. Really?
And that's in Job. That's with Job.
Well, that's in
Or is it
Revelation.
this one?
They're saying that Michael is actually sort of like a prosecutor, or in our case, a public defense attorney coming to our aid to stop the accusations, and so it's that type of thing. Let me see if I can find.
Well, here I thought it was a sword fight. That's what they always just, depict, don't they? It was a battle.
So it is the archangel Michael, not the Messiah. So this is interesting too. It's not the Messiah who wars against Satan in the final struggle. In Daniel 12:1, Michael is presented as the guardian of Israel, who in the last days will deliver them from tribulation.
Good for you.
I'm beating Louise.
Did you?
You might want to cut that out.
Those flies, I know.
But where do they come up that it's a legal fight instead of a knockdown fight?
In Job.
That's what I don't
Verse 10, where it says, the accuser.
Yeah.
get. Okay.
My footnote actually says depicted as the prosecuting attorney in the heavenly court. Satan means adversary in Hebrew, but similarly the Greek term devil comes from a verb that means to bring charges with hostile intent.
Yep. So basically, yeah, so he gets kicked out of heaven and is flung to the earth. And 12 is sort of, so the chapter 12 is talking about, here we go, guys. So this is why, so it's sort of giving us a reason why Satan's going to act the way Satan is on the earth. He got kicked out of heaven, and he comes to the earth. But woe to the earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So as John is writing this, John sees there's going to be a lot of persecution that's going to happen. And so people are going to ask why? Why? Because that's the question we ask, right? When bad things happen to good people, why did that have to happen? We think in our own lives. Why did I have to get sick? Why did this job opportunity go away? Why? We're always asking why, and John is giving them a why. Why is the church going to be persecuted? Why are we going to go through this? Well, it's because Satan has hit the ground running, and because he has lost the battle already, he is going to do as much damage as possible. And so that is what John is warning these churches. Because remember, these are the letters to those churches, those Christian churches in Asia Minor. We can't forget that. This is this letter to them, talking to them about things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And here's the reason why it's going to get worse. We sort of found out here in verse 12 that the devil's been let loose. We're going to suffer a lot of persecution. Hold on to your hats, because it's going to get windy. So if you're curious as to why the woman is in the wilderness, what again is John having the people remember?
The
The
Exodus.
wandering
The Exodus.
in
The Exodus, yes. You're remembering the Exodus. Because so we always think of the desert as the wilderness as a wasteland. We don't see it as a place. Our sensibilities are such we don't see it as a place of value. But for the Jewish folks at the time, this is where spiritual growth happened. Spiritual growth happened in the wilderness. The people of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years, and they grew as a people. They endured suffering and stuff like that. And yet God provided. And this story is a reminder that God will provide. So. And you often hear of. So the first part of 12 is basically just sort of a brief way of telling the Jesus story without telling the Jesus story. Jesus shows up, Satan tries to ambush him, Jesus outthinks Satan, and they basically, it's the Cliff Note version of all the Gospels in a couple sentences. It's basically what, at the beginning with the woman giving birth. And so what John is doing is just giving us a little background, a little context. So this happened, and this happened. So this is why Satan ended up down here. And this is why everything's going to go to heck in a handbasket. This is your why. And now in 13, he's going to start telling you, here's, all the bad things that are going to happen. This is the reason why these things are going to happen. I should say, you know the why in 12. Now let's start going through and saying, okay, this is what Satan's going to do. These are the things that Satan's going to do to you. And it's not going to be pretty. So, any other questions about 12?
Well, this last sentence is, and he stood on the sand of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
I assume the dragon did.
Yep.
Probably watching his destruction.
Where would that, or is he waiting for his next opportunity? Where would that?
Yep.
Who
So.
knows where it would be, I guess.
Yeah, so he's just got flung back down to the world, and then now you're going to see the unholy Trinity come about. So you have John talks, we know the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Now you're going to have the unholy Trinity show up. You're going to have the devil, the beast, and the second beast. They're all going to be showing up. And they act as sort of the anti-Trinity. And stuff like that. So, but that'll be here. Any other questions about 12, though?
Why does the earth have to suffer? I was thinking about that the way here, and it's just like, okay, I like the trees, I like the ocean, I like the flowers. Why is he destroying all this nice, pretty stuff?
Mad.
Well, it's some of it's.
But even earlier, it talked about a third of this and a third of
Correct.
that, and it's like, okay, I like the earth.
Yeah. And God loves the earth too.
And it's his beautiful creation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
and
it's quite a
just
slap in the face. Good job.
So, I think it's really about getting our attention. I think in all of these things, if you look at all the different plagues and the trumpets and that type of stuff that is happening, it's all been to get the people's attention. And the people are like, nope, we're good, we're fine. There's nothing that we need to do differently. And yet God is constantly saying, let's talk about this, let's, do something about this, let's, and the people, and so God is going to a little bit more extremes to say, hey, we need to talk. I am here. Let's talk about this. And people are going farther and further away and not acknowledging it. In some sense, it's sort of like if you think of a drug addict. You confront the drug addict. This you're having a problem. No, I'm not. And you have to start doing more. Well, we're going to cut off your money. Okay. How do you talk to somebody who is in need and get their attention?
They usually find a different way.
Right. Right. So.
And each one gets a little bit worse.
Right. Right. Because God's trying to apply the pressure and say, hey,
See, I missed it.
I left
So-
one for beta on there for you.
Any other questions about 12?
Is there some meaning to that 1,260 days? Because in chapter 11, they'll prophesy for 1,260 days, and then she went to, the woman fled to the desert where she will be taken care of for 1,260 days.
Yep. There is. So the duration of the divine nourishment, 1,260 days, corresponds to the period of persecution. So there's going to be that's how long the persecution is going to last for.
But where did they come up with the number?
That was, I think, the number of days that there was another time within.
Babylon? No.
It corresponds to the half of the tribulation period. Tribulation is supposed to last 7 years, with the worst being the last 3.5 years. And 1,260 days, a time, 2 times, and a half time are all the same. 3.5 years, 1,260 days.
Well,
So that's
where
what
you're
that
getting at in
time
14 then?
And time
Times
and a
and
half
Right.
times and
time.
times
Right.
and half time?
Yep.
Oh, that's where that's coming from.
That's where it's coming
Okay.
from. So again, just for number wise, always remember when you hear the number 7 in the Bible, it's for completeness. So the description of the dragon sort of depicts, the university of power. He is completely evil. So just so you are aware of that. Any other questions before we go to the favorite number? Just so you know, we will be singing hymn 666 this week too. Just for funsies.
And what's the name of that hymn?
It's funny they even put that in the hymnal. It's
Yeah.
just like hotels don't have a floor 13.
The hymnal's got 6666. I don't remember what the hymn is, but we are singing it this week. We're singing it this week.
Nobody will know it.
It's actually a very popular one, actually. So when we get done, I'll pull up hymnal out and take a look at it.
Actually, about 13 had
You're
problems.
quiet.
Yeah.
You're quiet. You're quiet.
No, I'm quiet.
It's listening.
So, all right. So, are you ready for 13? All right. Here we go.
I can't imagine a big 7 heads with 10 horns. They weren't distributed very easily.
No. All right. So why don't we do 6 verses again because we go through, is it 18? Yeah. So 1 through 6 for 13.
And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they had also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can make war against him?"
2 more verses, Mark. 2 more.
2 verses.
Read
Huh?
2 more.
Two more
2 more.
verses.
2 more verses.
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme to God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven.
And the beast was allowed to
wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And he was given authority to rule over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all the people who belong to this world worship the beast. They are the ones whose names are not written in the book of life that belongs to the Lamb, who was slaughtered before the world was made. Anyone with ears to hear shall listen and understand. Anyone who is destined to prison will be taken to prison. Anyone destined to die by the sword will die by the sword. This means that God's holy people must endure persecution patiently and remain faithful. How many verses?
Through 12.
The beast out of the earth. Then I saw another beast come up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like those of a lamb, but he spoke with the voice of a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast, and he required all the earth and its people to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed.
He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from the heavens on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast shall both speak and cause as many as not to worship the image of the beast to be killed. He caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and that no one may buy, sell, or trade and that no one may buy or sell except one who has a mark or the name of the beast or a number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the numbers of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
All
Like
right.
Hitler.
All
It
right.
kind of reminds you of the calf, the golden calf, a little bit.
Which one? The beast?
Where they want him to like
Could be.
worship
Oh, worship? The
and
image?
stuff.
Hey,
Reminds me of the golden
could be
calf.
Hitler.
It could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And back in that particular time, too, you had people, ventriloquism was a big thing, so that people would hear statues speak, because the ventriloquist would cause them to hear the statue speak, and so there was some. So that's
Well, they didn't catch on to that?
no.
Well, they weren't exposed to it. I mean, look at the, like the, back in the Highland,
They didn't have America's Got Talent.
Yeah, exactly.
The fairies took the babies and
Yeah.
traded them for a different baby,
Yeah.
They didn't know.
So where do you want to start with this one?
Can you go back and just say what the anti-trinity was again? It was the
So it's the dragon
dragon.
with the beast and the second beast.
And devil.
First and second beast.
First and second beast. And again, when you think of the beasts, John is probably pulling out of which book of the Bible? Which book of the Bible do you think John is going to be pulling out in terms of the beast?
Daniel.
Daniel, yep. Yep. So, so another thing to think about too, so the first beast comes out of the sea. So for people back in the first century, the sea represented evil. So the
Really?
beast comes out of the sea. So the beast comes out of the sea. They associate it. Okay, the beast is gonna. So your inference is gonna be, evil. Just like Iowa's got the best football team. So when you assume football players come out of Iowa, they're the best. No.
A lot of them do.
I thought I slipped that one there, but
Huh. I didn't
But yeah,
know
so
that
that
they taught that.
and hence the flood. So the other thing too is, in terms of when you think of the water coming out of the dragon's mouth, again that represented chaos. So that's why. So just so you know what that means. So what else about the text do you want to start with?
What about the deadly wound that was healed?
Yeah.
Yes.
If it's fatal, it's gone, isn't it? It's done.
Right.
But it's part of the deception that he was miraculously healed, just like Jesus was healed.
Correct.
And so it's all part of this deception that
Correct.
they're trying to.
Yep. Look at. So it's not just Jesus that does this. I can do this as well too.
Oh.
He sets himself up as God.
Correct. Yes. This anti-Trinity is setting themselves up against our Trinity. So, as we think of this, who would our first century brothers and sisters think a lot of who this would be? This anti-Trinity.
Probably like the
Romans.
Roman government.
Yes. Because at the time of this, what were the Roman emperors doing? What was we talked about it a couple weeks back. There was a big sort of movement and push within the Roman Empire at this time for what?
Emperor worship?
Yes, emperor worship, the imperial cult. So it makes a lot of sense at this particular point in time that, so this is becoming all the stuff that John is writing about is happening to them. If you weren't a part of the imperial cult, you weren't able to get a job. You weren't able to have trade.
Food and
Yeah. You were in jeopardy because you were not a part of the imperial cult. And the Roman emperors were very much, you didn't follow that, they just killed you. So this is what John is writing into. So if you look at it from a first century perspective, the beasts that are coming out of those Roman emperors. So you have the devil and then you have the Roman emperors. And the second beast would be the imperial priests then. So that second beast that are coming out pointing back to the Roman emperors. And there was a particular Roman emperor who had survived a miraculous type of thing. And I'm trying to remember which one it was, but who had been wounded in battle and came back to life. So let's see if I can find that. It was Caligula. Is a likely candidate in that he was taken with a serious illness and recovered. And he was also trying to put his statue in the middle of the Jewish temple before it was destroyed. So, again, the Jewish temple was really big for the people of Israel. It would be like putting a big statue in the middle of our sanctuary for whatever you want to say. But he was going to do that until he died. But he could be the emperor that they're talking about.
what's with the 42 months was mentioned before too, but they talk about 42 months again.
Right, it's that period of suffering.
It's another 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Mention of 3.5 years.
Same as that 60 days.
It's just another way of
Yep.
another calculation.
So they see the beast as a. So another answer to that question about the mortality of the beast. So since the beast is the Roman Empire in its persecution of the church, its recovery from a mortal wound could refer to the reestablishment of order under Vespasian from AD 69 to 79, following the chaotic and bloody revolution that had begun less than 2 years before with the death of Nero and extended through the border reigns of Galab, Ortho, and Vitalis. So you could look at the mortal wound being that as the beast represents Rome, that Rome was about to fall, but it came back into power through another strong leader. So, what else would you like to know? Or have questions about, I should say.
Well, a lot of people refer to the first beast as the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And what Peggy said earlier, I've heard that there's kind of a belief that in each generation or for a span of years, there could be an Antichrist in place. And Hitler was looked at in his time, and people thought, oh, this is it, because he definitely represents. But in another generation, now maybe it could be Putin. I'm just tossing these out as, I mean, you can see different evil beings in all generations across the span of time that could be in place.
And that makes sense. I've heard the same thing. And Satan does not know when the end is. So
He's gonna try.
he knows scripture, but he, like the rest of us, don't know the day or the hour, the end times. So he has always had an Antichrist ready in case that was the time.
Ah.
Whether it was Caligula or Hitler or Nero.
Right. So that's. So it's like I said. So you have this, like I said, set of Holy Trinity, unholy Trinity, sort of set apart for people and stuff like that. So I know the real reason you came today. So let's talk about everybody's favorite number. All right. Let me get to the. Alright, so that is 18. And I'm just going to read this to you because I found this very fascinating. So no verse in Revelation has received more attention than this one with its cryptic reference to the number of the beast. Although the verse opens with the declaration, "This calls for wisdom," the history of interpretation demonstrates that no consensus, shocking, has been reached on whom or what John had in mind. The person who had understanding is called upon to calculate the number of the beast. This is an invitation to work backwards from the number 666 to the name for which it is the numerical equivalent. Gematry was widely used in apocalyptic because of its symbolic and enigmatic quality. It served as a precaution against the charge of sedition. So meaning you didn't have to say the person's name, you could just give them a number. And so, that's what I'm talking about, the number. You can say, well, it's not really referring to that person, even though you are referring to that person. So the number of the beast is the number of a certain man. Some writers feel that the clause should be read, for it is a human rather than a supernatural number. But exactly what a non-human number would be or why it should enter this context is not at all clear. The reference is to some definite historical person. The beast number is 666. Already by the 2nd century, the solution to the riddle has escaped so prominent a theologian as Aurelius, a native of Asia Minor and a disciple of Polycarp. So he was a big theologian within the early church. So if Aurelius didn't know what was going on, no one knew what was going on. He was he was one of the early bishops as well too. So he knew his stuff. You know, and so in his work against heresies, he mentions as possible interpretations, Eleuthiasis, a name no longer identifiable, Latinos, the Roman Empire, and Tiatin, the Titans of Greek mythology who rebelled against the gods. Another early conjecture was aromane, a form of the Greek verb meaning to deny. Recent suggestions are equally ingenuous and similarly unconvincing. Guide finds that the initials of the Roman emperors from Julius Caesar to Vespasian add up to 666. But he had to omit 2 of them to make it work. So to make it work, yes. So Stratford suggests that John was counting up an abbreviated form in Greek of the full Latin title of Domitian, which appeared in part of his coinage. Now, a rather different solution has been, so the problem with that, though, is they're using the Latin. The Latin would not have been around when John was writing this. So it's like saying
throw
this
that one out.
Right, so so this is the other one that I talked to you about. A rather different solution has been offered by G.A. Vanderberg. Holy cow, he's got a whole big name. By G.A. Vanderberg van Elsinga. I thought I had a lot of words in my name. Who shows us that 666 is the triangular number of 36, 1 plus 2 plus 3, etc., up to 36, and 36 is the triangular number of 8, the number of the Antichrist. The solution most commonly accepted today is that 666 is the number equivalent of Nero Caesar. It is held to be supported by the variant reading 616, which also yields the name of Nero when the Latinized spelling is followed. What is generally not stressed is that this solution asks us to calculate a Hebrew transliteration of the Greek from a Latin name, and that with a defective spelling. A shift to Hebrew letters is unlikely in Revelations as it is written in Greek, and there is no indication that the riddle is to be solved by transposing it into another language. Further, the name of Nero was apparently never suggested by the ancient commentators, even though his persecuting zeal made him a model of the Antichrist. So some writers take the number more as a symbol than a cryptogram. 666 is the number that falls short of perfection in each of its digits. For Hendrickson, it represents failure upon failure upon failure. It is symbolic of the beast's continuing failure to accomplish his purpose. It is the trinity of imperfection. In a view of widely divergent and highly speculative solutions to the riddle, it seems best to conclude that John intended only his intimate associates to be able to decipher the number. So successful were his precautions that even Aurelius, some 100 years later, was unable to identify the person intended. An additional 1,800 years of conjecture have not brought us any closer to the definite answer.
And if that's not meant to be until
Yeah.
the future yet from us, how can they figure it out?
Yeah.
But what gets me is people try to figure it out using English with a 26-letter alphabet.
Right.
They definitely didn't have English back then.
No. Like I said, I still love the guy who said, "Well, it's all the Roman emperors. It all adds up. We just got these 2 we got to take out.
Let's make it work.
Let's make it work." Yeah. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you what the name of the person who's is regarded to be 666. So
All a mystery.
it's all a mystery. So I hope.
I've always thought more in that chapter about the mark of the beast.
Right.
On the forehead and the hand.
That's what I was going to ask next, and it's the right hand.
Yeah.
I think it's
what's significant with that? Were they doing something back in that day about?
Well, your right hand, at least in Middle Eastern cultures, is the hand that you always do business with. You know, because you use your other hand for not so good stuff. So,
And I've something else with in the ancient cultures, your right hand is what you ate with.
Right.
Your left hand was with,
That's what I was meaning by that. Yes.
and you didn't want your right hand to know what your left hand was doing.
Yes.
So that's where that comes from, huh?
Yes. So yeah.
So it'd be more obvious of who you belong to then.
Yeah.
Right.
And the right hand was the favored side.
Mhm.
Jesus sat down at the right hand of God when he went back to heaven, the favored side. And the James and John, their mother, asked for her sons to sit at the right hand and left hand. One the more favored, but the
Yeah.
two favored spots.
Exactly.
I was thinking like cattle and branding.
So that's the other thing too. Is
So you belong to me.
right. And if you look at a lot of ancient religions, they branded themselves. Not they had tattoos, they had marks on them that represented who do you belong to. So that was not uncommon in the day. You would have, if you belonged to Zeus or if you were a follower of Athena or something like that, you would have a tattoo on your body that would associate
If you followed who?
Athena?
Athena?
Yeah.
It's her granddaughter.
I think it's supposed to be strength and courage or I don't know, something like that.
So it'd be, so that was not uncommon at that time. So having a mark on you would have been very common. So one of the things that Christians would have the mark on would have a fish on them, which would symbolize Christ. So it's not uncommon.
And the way the world is going now, people used to think that the UPC code was going to be something like that. Now it's the QR code. But there is, for real, there's a company in River Falls that has a chip implanted in their employees that's how they unlock the doors in the morning. They just put their hand.
Instead of losing
It could be
keys.
their time card, check in.
Yeah. So it's so we don't know. So from a first century, so again, it depends on how you view the text. Do you view this text as John talking to just first century Christians and telling them? So again, why are you going to be going through this? You're going to be, so the reason why everything is heck right now is because you're going through this fire right now. Know that it's not going to be easy. You're going to feel the persecution, which is funny. We're talking about persecution this week in the Beatitudes. I didn't time it this way. But how do you be a Christian and deal with persecution?
Was Nero the emperor at this time? Or was that?
Depends. We don't know when it was written exactly.
That's true.
So that's the hard part. We don't know exactly. And then John could have been referring to somebody earlier.
Yeah.
That's.
But Nero was famous for his persecution.
Oh yeah.
Of
So
the Christians.
Caligula was not a nice guy either.
Yeah.
I mean, because again, the Roman emperors wanted you to bow down to them. They were your gods, and if you did not bow down to them, they would take care of you, in not a nice way. So again, if you look at the text through a first century lens, you can see how John is warning the people this is going to happen, and he can't be charged with sedition or slamming the Roman Empire because he's talking in terms.
riddle.
It's in riddle. Yeah, it's in terms of symbolic language, and so if a Roman would read this,
I think that would be gobbledygook.
yeah, it's gobbledygook. Like for us, many times when we read this, we're like, well, I don't know what he's. But John wrote it that way to encourage the Christians at that time. Now, if you look at this text through a general sort of worldview, like, okay, so at the end of time, these things are going to happen. These are Christians, what we need to do as Christians going forward, that's a different message for you. Mm-hmm. And that's why when we started Revelations, I said you're going to have to look at each of the texts and figure out where you're at in your viewpoint for this particular point in the text. Because what this text is saying for someone, if you're more interested in what's happening in the first century, is going to be different if you start looking this in your own life today or into the future or into the past. So, and this is what makes Revelations very tricky, because you have to constantly it's sort of like having your glasses, like this. You're trying to figure out, well, can I see it here? Can I see it there? It's not an easy thing to do. So when you leave today and go like, I have no idea what he talked about today, that's okay. Or I don't know what to do with this. That's okay, because
The thing that I think is interesting, he talks about, the persecution, and he talks about the Roman Empire, and I also, we hear that the United States is like the modern day Roman Empire.
Right.
And so it's like,
It's always seemed that God has bifocals. Because he can take something from the first century.
Right.
And
make it relevant for today, yes. Yeah. And so that's hard for us to see, and it's hard for, so again, like I said, a lot of the terminology and symbols that we're using, that John is using, is stuff that we're not familiar with. So again, it'd be like me doing the same thing with Revelations, but using, movie references from the 1970s. If you had any of your grandkids look at those references, they're probably not going to know what those mean. For us who lived through the 70s, we'll be like, okay, that makes sense. So think of it like that.
Who are you gonna call?
Yeah. So
When I was listening to it, that's what came to my mind. Instead of Star Wars stuff, I was thinking, who are you gonna call?
absolutely, but so as we look at the text, this is why the text is confusing to us, because John is pulling out references that people within the first century are going to know. And you can see Aurelius, who just lived 100 years after them, didn't know the same context. So if you have somebody who is like one of the biggest brainiacs in terms of Bible knowledge and Bible, what would happen, we rely on Aurelius to tell us what happened at the early church. If he can't figure it out, and he was closer to that source than we are, we have no hope to figure it out. Unless, like I said, Don brings up a good point, if we just haven't seen it yet. So...
You talked about the ventriloquist and the statues. This morning on the news, they had this AI, this artificial intelligence. People are now using, my voice. They're calling Marvel for her driver's license.
Yep.
Or
Oh, yeah,
using
it's a
my
big
voice. This is a Pandora's box.
It is.
But yet, maybe God could use this for opening some eyes too, but it's quite scary.
Well, I haven't told you guys this, but
I'm gonna tell you now.
I'm going to tell you now. So the prayer of the day we've been using for the whole summer, AI has been writing that.
Really?
AI has been writing.
Oh.
But it's just
Really?
like anything.
It's like
there's the good, and
it's
then
a
there's
tool.
the bad with
Yeah.
it.
It's a tool.
It's just like people thought
Good and
when
evil with
the
everything.
internet came out that it was
Right.
going to be bad.
Yeah.
But then there's been good with it. And
Yep.
how did we survive the
it's
pandemic?
who
You know.
uses it and how.
Right. So it's a wonderful tool, because like I said, so when you ask it to take this Bible verse and this Bible verse, blend it together and create a prayer within 30 words, it can do it.
This is an app
Wow.
that you use or what?
I use ChatGPT.
Oh, what?
ChatGPT. That's the big one. OpenAI is what the founder is for that. So, but I use it to. I actually did a podcast on having it talk about one of the texts for the Revised Common Lectionary. So I had a conversation with it and said, okay, tell me something unique about this particular text. And it'd go through and it speaks in generality. So the thing that you have to know about AI is it can be wrong. You have to call it out when it's wrong. And sometimes it still doesn't realize it's wrong. I did that when I was working on a screenplay article. I said, just give me, because I wanted to create some stuff. I'm like, okay, so tell me some differences between these two screenwriting programs, and both of them were free. And it told me one of them costs money. I'm like, no, it doesn't cost money. Yes, it does. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. I said, no, it doesn't. Oh yeah, you're right. It doesn't cost you.
So it did admit it though.
It did admit it, yes. after
you
the,
had to call it up.
I'd keep calling it out. I'm like, no, it doesn't cost any money. I said, go to the website. It doesn't cost any money. Fine. It doesn't cost any money. So,
You know, I was thinking the other
Interesting.
day here, pastors back, 60 years or whatever, they had to do everything right from this book.
oh yeah.
They didn't have Google.
No.
They didn't have any ways to cheat.
No.
Everything was done by this book.
Their
Well,
interpretation of
but
that book.
interpret-
I don't know if that's called.
But I mean, there was a lot more study
There was,
involved.
I would say there would be commentaries though they would pull out. So a lot of times with people back even 60 years ago, they would pull out they would do exactly what we did here. And so instead of having the commentary on
Yeah.
I would have the big commentary book. And
Yeah.
that would be, so yeah, I mean, they still had commentaries back then.
References.
Yeah, so I think ever since there's been a Bible, there's been people talking about it, writing books about it. I mean, ever since the Bible came out, people, well, even when they just had the scrolls, people were writing letters. This can't be right. This has to be right. Most of the fights within the early church were about what does this mean? And so you would have two opposing viewpoints, and people would duke it out metaphorically until someone was called a heretic, and then they'd have to leave the church, which wasn't always helpful. But yeah, so I mean that's part of our church history. I think that would be fun to go tell you sort of
Maybe.
all sort of the church history, because I think we just sort of think that Jesus went back up to heaven, disciples started the church, and everybody went to lutefisk dinners, and it just was that. But it's been very slow. It's been very methodical. It's been very ups and downs within the church, as there is today. So that has not changed. But if you ever have a question of whether there is a God, just know that if this organization could keep going for as long as it had, with all the screw ups and all the people that have been in power that should never have been in power, God has to be present, because there's no way on God's green earth any organization like the church would ever be able to flourish for as long as it has.
Just the fact that the Bible has survived.
And it's
Yeah, I
still
know.
in print in how many languages? Yeah.
And it's still like the top
Top
book.
Yeah.
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 The bestseller. Yeah, they don't put the Bible on there anymore because it always outsells every other book
Really?
every year. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, the Bible outsells any other book that's ever been on the market. The Harry Potter books, not even close. They have to take the Bible off, otherwise it would always be at number one.
Yep.
That's how influential the Bible has been. So maybe we should just do. Maybe I should just do an adult forum on how the Bible came about. That would be interesting.
Well, I brought this today because last week we were talking about the various Bibles.
Yeah.
And the King James in particular is
Yes.
supposed to be the ultimate. It was not the first English Bible. This part of it just talks about the various English translation Bibles.
Really?
The Wycliffe Bible, the Tyndale Bible, the Cloverdale Bible, and a bunch of other ones that were all pre-King James.
Yeah.
So if anybody was interested in
And again, the King James was written so that you would be able to memorize it easier. That's the whole point of King James, that you could just
Yeah.
rattle the verses off, so you would understand it. And,
I think the king wanted his name on it.
well, there's that too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, any other questions?
But, I mean, all this stuff is probably part of God's plan. I mean, He makes us aware, opens our eyes to certain things at certain times. I think.
Yeah.
And it's someday that meaning of 666 will be clear.
Right. Yeah, it will be.
Well, with the dwindling memberships, in congregations, it's very encouraging to hear that the Bible is still the bestseller.
Oh, yeah.
So even if you're not here,
Right.
but yet, this is God's house. It's nice to coming to.
And then maybe it's a shift. God is creating a shift within us as people as to how we,
Proclaim His.
yeah, how we worship, how we proclaim
How
our faith.
serve
Yeah.
everything.
Do we go back to, different ways to do this. Maybe we're not supposed to be in buildings anymore.
True. I wonder if you ask AI, explain Revelations chapter. Whatever
Yeah, what are they gonna say?
Okay.
I don't know if you want to go, Matt, you do it.
Now, let me do the. Let's see. Did I? Should be stop here.
Better watch the clock here.
Yeah, we're gonna get going here in a second.
So next week, are we just going to do just 14 and 15, or are we
Yeah.
going to do more?